Set the scene. The farmer's dog. Clarkson's pub tucked away in Oxfordshire. A VIP summer party in full flow. 200 guests standing around with pints of Hawkstone. The Hawkstone Farmers Choir taking the stage for the very first time. Glass engraving, cider tasting, live music filling the courtyard. Every single element Clarkson had spent months putting together was working exactly as planned, apart from one. The person who was meant to be leading the cider tasting was missing. Kaleb Cooper, recently wed, farm manager of Diddley Squat, the face you've seen in the latest Hawkstone TV ad, the man a portion of those 200 guests had specifically come to meet, was not at the party. Clarkson walked up to the microphone, faced the crowd, and told them the truth. At 8:30 that morning, harvest had started at Diddley Squat. Kaleb had climbed up into his brand new combine harvester, his own machine, bought specifically for this season, and rolled out across the oat fields. It was the first time he had ever run his own combine on his own farm. A moment of genuine significance. By 8:45, the combine had stopped working. 15 minutes. The machine held together for 15 minutes, and then, because this is Diddley Squat, and because whatever force governs this farm has a very particular sense of humor, it rained. For the first time in 4 months. A summer that had been bone dry, that had given farmers exactly the conditions they needed for a clean harvest, chose that specific morning to break its drought. The oats Kaleb had been watching grow all season, the crop the whole operation had been building toward, were now sitting in a wet field going absolutely nowhere. Kaleb sent his apologies to the party. He was 30 meters away, stuck in a waterlogged field, waiting for grain moisture levels to fall, with a broken combine and 200 guests wondering where he'd got to. Clarkson didn't attempt to hide any of it. He told the audience exactly what was happening. Then he finished his speech, brought the choir on, and drove back to the farm. This is what harvest looks like at Diddley Squat in the summer of 2026. To understand why that combine breakdown matters, beyond the obvious comedy of it, you need to understand what Kaleb's machine actually represents. For 4 years on Clarkson's farm, Kaleb has been operating equipment owned either by the farm or by his own contracting business. A farm manager without his own combine is commercially exposed during harvest, entirely reliant on machinery he doesn't control, during windows that are narrow, weather-dependent, and brutally unforgiving if you miss them. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's a genuine liability. Kaleb's combine wasn't an extravagance. It was a business decision. The kind made by someone who built a contracting operation from nothing, who understands farm economics better than most people on that show, and whose business had reached the point where owning made more sense than borrowing. The fact that it failed 15 minutes into its very first run, on the opening morning of harvest, is not just darkly funny. It is a disaster of a very specific Diddley Squat variety, the kind where the thinking was right, the investment was justified, the preparation was solid, and the result was the complete opposite of all of that. Clarkson, standing on stage at his own commercial event with a Hawkstone in hand, walked the crowd through the sequence with the quiet exhaustion of someone who has spent 5 years learning that Diddley Squat plays by its own rules. "We began the harvest at Diddley Squat this very morning," he told them. 8:30 a.m. Kaleb, for the first time ever, with his new combine, doing the combining. 8:45 a.m. His combine broke down. He paused. The crowd laughed. Then he delivered the follow-up, but the combine got fixed. And then, and this is entirely true, for the first time in 4 months, it rained. The laughter that came back was the laughter of an audience that understood, probably more than they'd anticipated when they bought tickets to a beer party, that British farming is essentially a story about preparation colliding with weather, and weather holding all the cards. 4 months without meaningful rainfall. A summer dry enough to bring grain moisture levels down to where farmers need them. The harvest window that British arable growers spend every other month of the year waiting for, finally opened. And then, on the first morning, with the combine repaired and Kaleb back in position, it rained. To someone outside farming, that reads as bad luck. To anyone who farms, it reads as British farming. The harvest window isn't a season you can plan around with confidence. It's a negotiation between the grower and the sky is not a reliable negotiating partner. Rain on standing or cut grain drives moisture content straight back up. Running a combine through wet crop risks damaging the machine and the grain together. Anything that goes into storage above safe moisture levels will heat, spoil, and cost you. So you stop, you wait, you check the readings. You scan the forecast and try to calculate whether today is your day or whether the window is closing while you stand there looking at it. At Diddly Squat, Clarkson confirmed Kaleb was sitting in the field waiting for moisture levels to drop before he could get going again. Not combining, not harvesting, waiting, with a machine that had already failed once that morning, in the first rain the area had seen in 4 months. Clarkson's assessment of the season ahead came in one word: shocking. That word means something specific coming from him. This is a man who has watched entire crops fail on this farm, who sat through a bovine TB lockdown that froze all cattle movement for 2 months, who came close to dying from heart disease before season 5, and then, in the same breath that he told his farm manager about his cancer diagnosis, told his viewing audience too. When Jeremy Clarkson calls a harvest shocking, he has a very clear frame of reference for what shocking actually costs. This harvest, he's saying, could be worse than most. And this is where it stops being a story about a comedian with a broken machine and becomes something the wider farming industry is paying attention to. Clarkson said something in Season 5 of Clarkson's Farm that this channel covered closely at the time. He admitted on camera, on the world's largest streaming platform, that Diddly Squat cannot survive financially without Amazon paying him to make television. The land doesn't turn a profit. The crops don't generate enough income to cover what it costs to grow them. The TV show is not just a program that happens to feature a real farm. It is the financial mechanism keeping the agricultural side of the operation alive. A bad harvest at Diddly Squat is therefore not just a bad harvest. It is further proof of the underlying economics that Clarkson himself has now stated publicly. The oats, sitting in a soaked field, waiting for moisture levels to come down, are not simply oats. They're part of the maths that determines whether the farm gets anywhere near breaking even this year. What's also become clear looking at the full picture is that the harvest situation has direct consequences for Hawkstone Brewery. The barley and grain grown at Diddly Squat and across the farms in its supply network feed into the brewing operation. A difficult harvest across the region creates supply pressure on the raw ingredients that set Hawkstone apart from large industrial brewers who source from wherever commodity prices are lowest. This isn't abstract. When Clarkson says the harvest looks shocking, he's describing a problem that runs directly upstream of the beer currently being poured in more than 2,000 pubs across Britain. The big breweries Hawkstone competes with can handle a poor British harvest by buying grain internationally. That's the model: global procurement, no fixed dependency on British weather or British soil. Hawkstone's entire identity runs in the opposite direction: local sourcing, British barley, transparent supply chains, which means when the British harvest struggles, Hawkstone absorbs the impact in a way that Carlsberg or AB InBev simply do not. You can't solve that kind of problem by picking up the phone to a grain merchant in Germany or Argentina. If you're finding value in this breakdown, share this video right now. Not for the numbers, but because every person who thinks Diddly Squat is just a television show about a man with a tractor needs to understand that the economics underneath it are real, live, and relevant to farms across Britain at this exact moment. Hit share. Subscribe to Clarkson's Empire if you're new here. This is precisely what this channel was built to cover. Diddly Squat is not the only farm watching the weather this week. What's just come into focus from the latest industry figures is that British arable farming is heading into the 2026 harvest in a considerably more precarious condition than most people outside the sector appreciate. Wheat yields across Britain came in below the 5-year average for 3 consecutive seasons: 2022, 2023, and 2024. Not one difficult year followed by a rebound. 3 years in a row of below-average returns, each one arriving on top of the financial strain left behind by the last. Fertilizer costs remain elevated following the energy price crisis of the early 2020s. Fuel costs have stayed high. Minimum wage increases, which are the right policy, still add directly to the cost base of any farm that takes on labor at harvest time. And the price farmers actually receive at the gate for what they produce has not come close to keeping pace with any of those input rises. The October 2024 budget brought changes to agricultural property relief that have introduced inheritance tax liabilities onto farms that were built around the assumption that the relief was permanent. Families who have worked the same land across generations are now navigating a tax position that didn't exist 2 years ago, while simultaneously managing a third straight below-average harvest season. That is the backdrop against which Kaleb Cooper's combine broke down at 8:45 on a Tuesday morning in July. It's funny, It is also a very precise illustration of what farming in Britain in 2026 actually is. The equipment investment that was supposed to give the operation more independence. The harvest window that was meant to be the return on a hard season's work. The rain that arrived at the single worst moment. At Diddley Squat, unlike almost everywhere else, there is a television deal to cushion the blow. There is a brewery doing £21 million in annual turnover. There is a pub with 146 staff and a Hawkstone margin covering what the food operation loses. Clarkson has built enough financial structure around the farm to absorb the kind of season he's describing. For every other farm having an identical morning, combined trouble, unexpected rain, moisture readings that refuse to come down, there is no Amazon arrangement. No brewery, no pub, just a field and a bank account. Here is the detail that landed heaviest at the VIP party, and that deserves more attention than it's received. Clarkson didn't stay. He made the announcement about what was unfolding at Diddley Squat. He introduced the Hawkstone Farmers Choir, the same choir whose operatic version of farming, It's Good, was banned from broadcast television and then watched by 500,000 people on Instagram inside 24 hours, now performing live for the first time. He watched them perform, and then he left. He drove back to the farm to be with Kaleb in a wet field with a combine that had already broken once that morning. Consider where Clarkson is physically right now. He disclosed aggressive prostate cancer at the end of the season 5 finale. Surgery followed, with complications. His final words to camera, from a hospital bed, were, "If this all goes to plan, I'll see you for season 6, and if it doesn't, I won't." He has since confirmed he is in remission. The bloods came back clear. This is a 66-year-old man who recently came through cancer surgery, who pushes past medical guidance when the situation calls for it, who walked out of his own commercial event, 200 guests, live entertainment, a full program, to drive back to a field because the harvest needed doing and Kaleb needed another pair of hands. That decision tells you what Diddley Squat actually is, beneath the television series and the brewery and the pub. It is a working farm. And working farms have harvest windows that are completely indifferent to your VIP party schedule, your recovery timeline, or the choir you've spent months organizing. The oats come in when the oats can come in, and everything else arranges itself around that. They worked through the night. Clarkson's parting line to the party before he left was exactly what you'd expect from him. "For real, this year I have to get back. I do apologize. We're going to be going through the night to get the oats in." And then he was gone. Season 6 of Clarkson's Farm has been confirmed by Amazon, with production expected in 2027. Whatever shape this harvest takes, however many nights they put in, however long the moisture levels stay too high to cut, it will almost certainly appear on screen eventually. That's the particular irony built into the Diddley Squat model. The worse the harvest, the stronger the television. The more that breaks, the more compelling the series. The shocking year Clarkson is predicting is a financial problem for the farm, and it's probably some of the best material the show has had in years. Kaleb, meanwhile, is preparing for something no previous harvest has involved. Kaleb Down Under starts filming this autumn, his first solo Amazon series, his first ever long-haul flight. A few months ago, he was a 26-year-old who had barely been further than Chipping Norton. He is now 27, married 3 weeks ago, father of 3 children, with a brand new combine that gave out 15 minutes into the first harvest of his married life, and a camera crew waiting for him on the other side of the world. Somewhere between the breakdown and the rain and the all-night oat harvest, the newly married Mr. Cooper will have had a moment to consider how much has changed since he first got on a tractor at Diddley Squat for a television program nobody was entirely sure would land. From 50 pounds an hour to a broken combine, a wife, 3 kids, and Australia in roughly 5 years. Not a bad run, even in a shocking harvest year. Here's what the events of that morning reveal that the party coverage has mostly overlooked. The Hawkstone VIP summer party was a genuine landmark. The choir that regulators had pulled from television, performing live for the first time. A commercial event that 200 people attended because they wanted to be part of something that has grown into a meaningful presence in British food and farming culture. And the man who built it wasn't there for most of it, because 15 miles away, a combine had broken down and the oats needed to come in. That tension between the commercial operation Clarkson has constructed around the farm and the farm itself, which remains as ungovernable and weather-dependent and mechanically unreliable as it has always been, is the real story of Diddley Squat in 2026. The brewery is valued at £75 million. The pub employs 146 people. The merchandise operation turns over tens of millions. The television series has made both Clarkson and Kaleb recognizable on 4 continents. And the harvest is shocking. The combine lasted 15 minutes. The rain came back after 4 months specifically to ruin the opening morning. Clarkson left his own party to drive a tractor through the night. That is not a television show. That is a farm. And farms don't care how well the brewery is doing, how many tickets sold for the VIP party, or whether the choir got a standing ovation. They just need the oats in. Drop what do you think in the comments if you reckon this harvest story ends up in Season 6. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and let us know what you want us to investigate next. See you in the next one.